Human guided an alien girl through the smoke fields. She repaid him with the truth he needed. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Ethan was not the kind of person who sought out adventure. He lived a quiet life, tucked away in a small town where everything moved at a slow, predictable pace. But sometimes, life had other plans. A few days earlier, he had received a strange message from an old acquaintance, an anonymous scientist who claimed to have discovered something extraordinary in the smoke fields, a vast and dangerous stretch of land covered in an ever-present haze. The message was cryptic, but the key part caught Ethan's attention. I need your help. You're the only one who can get her through the smoke. Ethan had no idea who she was, but he knew this was the kind of thing that could change everything. The smoke fields had always been a place of mystery. Dangerous, yes, but also fascinating to anyone with a curious mind. For centuries, people had whispered about the strange occurrences in the area, the thick, suffocating fog that seemed to swallow everything in its path, the rumors of beings who could navigate the smoke with ease, and the occasional sighting of figures who appeared to come from another world. When Ethan arrived at the edge of the smoke fields, he saw her standing there. She was not what he had expected. The alien girl, with her striking features and eyes that shimmered like starlight, looked lost in thought. Her skin was pale, almost ethereal, and she seemed to be waiting for him. She had a presence that made everything around her seem still. Are you Ethan? She asked, her voice soft yet unmistakably clear. Ethan nodded, his heart racing. He had no idea how she knew his name, but something in her gaze told him that she wasn't from around here. I'm Lyra, she said, as if her name carried a weight of its own. I need you to guide me through the smoke fields. Ethan stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. He had no experience with aliens, and certainly not with anything that lived in the smoke fields. But something about Lyra's demeanor was calm, and he could sense a quiet desperation in her voice that he couldn't ignore. He took a deep breath. All right, Lyra, he said, finally speaking. I'll help you, but we need to be careful. The smoke here can disorient you. Lyra gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. I'm not afraid of the smoke, she replied. I've been through worse. Ethan raised an eyebrow but didn't press the matter further. He had his own questions, but they could wait. For now, the journey ahead was the most important thing. With that, they began walking into the dense, foggy expanse of the smoke fields, neither of them fully aware of what lay ahead. Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of who Lyra really was and why she was here. The fields were not a place for the faint of heart, and yet here she was, calm, almost serene, as if the smoke was nothing more than a small inconvenience to her. As they ventured further into the haze, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was about to reveal more than just the mysteries of the smoke fields. It was about to reveal truths that would change everything. As Ethan and Lyra moved deeper into the smoke fields, the thick fog seemed to close in around them. Ethan kept his eyes fixed ahead, trying to make sense of the disorienting haze that stretched endlessly before them. The air was heavy, and each step they took felt as though they were walking through a dense, invisible wall. He glanced at Lyra, whose serene expression remained unchanged, even as the smoke swirled in all directions. He couldn't help but wonder how someone like her could remain so calm in such a dangerous place. You said you've been through worse. Ethan finally spoke, his voice cutting through the eerie silence. What do you mean by that? Lyra's eyes flickered briefly as she turned her head to look at him. My journey to Earth wasn't exactly a peaceful one, she said softly. I've been through more than you can imagine. Ethan nodded, sensing there was more to her story than she was willing to share just yet. He didn't press her further, but his curiosity was growing. As they continued walking, the strange sensation of being watched crept up on him. He looked around, but the fog offered no clues. It was as if the very air itself was alive, and it had been waiting for them. Do you ever feel like we're not alone here? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra paused for a moment, her gaze sweeping the dense fog. There are things in the smoke that most humans can't see, she said quietly. things that are always watching, waiting. But they won't harm you if you don't threaten them. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories of strange creatures that supposedly inhabited the smoke fields, but hearing it from Lyra's lips made it all feel so real. "So you can see them?" he asked, his voice edged with disbelief. Lyra nodded, her expression unreadable. "I can see more than you think," she replied. Ethan felt a strange mix of awe and fear. There was something about Lyra that he couldn't quite place. She was not just a traveler from another world. There was something else about her, something that made her seem older, wiser, and more powerful than any human he had ever known. They continued walking, the fog thickening around them. The temperature seemed to drop with each step, and Ethan pulled his jacket tighter around him. The landscape was disorienting. Endless fields of smoke and twisted, gnarled trees that looked as though they had been there for centuries. Everything was muted, as though the world had been stripped of color and sound. The only thing that remained was the sensation of walking through a dream that seemed to be slowly folding in on itself. "How much farther?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly as he tried to keep his bearings. Lyra paused and glanced at him, her face unreadable. "We're close," she said. "But there is something you need to understand before we go any further." Ethan stopped in his tracks, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "This journey isn't just about getting through the smoke fields," Lyra said, her voice growing more serious. "It's about what you'll discover when you reach the other side. The truth that will change everything." Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What kind of truth was she talking about? What was waiting for him on the other side of the smoke fields? He wanted to ask more, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he nodded slowly, unsure of what to expect but determined to see this through. The air around them seemed to hum with an unseen energy as they continued their journey, each step taking them further into the unknown. They were close now, closer than Ethan had ever been to discovering something that could change his life forever. The smoke fields were not just a physical barrier. They were a test, a threshold that would reveal not just the world beyond, but the truth that lay buried deep within Ethan himself. The air grew colder, and Ethan could feel the weight of Lyra's words pressing down on him. They had been walking for what felt like hours, but the landscape around them remained eerily unchanged. The smoke fields stretched endlessly, a sea of gray mist that seemed to absorb all sound and light. Ethan's heart was racing. There was something about the way Lyra spoke, her calm demeanor and cryptic warnings, that made him feel like he was on the edge of something huge, something he couldn't yet understand. "What truth are you talking about?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, almost afraid of the answer. Lyra didn't immediately respond. She kept walking, her steps sure and steady despite the thick fog. Finally, she spoke, her voice distant as if she were thinking about something far away. "There are things in this world, things that most people never see, never even think to look for. The smoke fields, the things that dwell here, they're part of it. They are not the danger, Ethan. The real danger is something far worse, something hidden in plain sight." Ethan frowned, confusion clouding his mind. "What do you mean by hidden in plain sight?" Lyra stopped for a moment, her gaze moving through the fog as if she were searching for something. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as though she were looking for something, or someone, in the distance. "Everything you think you know is a lie," she said softly, her voice heavy with meaning. "The truth is buried so deep, it's almost impossible to see. But once you do, once you understand, you'll see the world differently." Ethan could feel a cold shiver running down his spine. What was she talking about? Was this all some sort of test, or was Lyra trying to tell him something bigger? "What am I supposed to understand?" he asked, frustration creeping into his tone. "I don't understand any of this." Lyra turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You're already beginning to see, Ethan," she said. "That's why you're here. This journey, it's not just about getting through the smoke fields. It's about you, your purpose, your role in all of this." Ethan felt a surge of anxiety. His mind was racing, trying to process the implications of her words. His whole life, everything he had known, seemed so small now compared to the vastness of what Lyra was suggesting. "But why me?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm just a regular guy. I don't have any special skills. I'm not some hero or chosen one. I don't even know what's going on." Lyra took a step closer to him, her eyes locking onto his. You don't have to be anything special, Ethan. You just need to be willing to see the truth. And sometimes, the truth is more frightening than anything you can imagine. She turned and began walking again, this time with a sense of urgency. Ethan hesitated for a moment before following her. The fog was thicker now, the air heavier, as if the very atmosphere around them was holding its breath. Each step felt more important than the last. They were getting closer to something that would change everything. As they moved forward, Ethan's mind was filled with questions. What truth could she be talking about? Why was he the one who needed to see it? And, most pressing of all, what would happen when they reached the end of this journey? Lyra's steps quickened as they drew closer to the heart of the smoke fields, the place where the fog was thickest, the air coldest. Ethan felt a tightening in his chest, the anticipation building. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just an observer. He was part of something much bigger than himself, and he had no idea where this path would lead. But there was no turning back now. They were too close. The air was colder now, the fog thicker, and with each step Ethan felt the world around him growing heavier. Lyra walked ahead of him, her silhouette barely visible through the haze. The quiet was overwhelming, and yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing them in, something vast and unknowable. His heart pounded in his chest as he hurried to catch up with her. Lyra, where are we going? He asked, his voice tight with tension. We're almost there, she replied without turning around. But remember what I said. You have to be ready to see the truth. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't know what he expected, maybe a revelation, a grand moment of clarity. But the uncertainty gnawed at him. What truth? What had he gotten himself into? They walked in silence for a while, the weight of the fog pressing in on them, the world feeling increasingly unreal. Ethan's thoughts raced, but he kept them to himself. It was clear now that Lyra wasn't just a guide. She was part of something far bigger, something he wasn't yet able to comprehend. Lyra, he spoke again, his voice breaking the silence. What do you mean by the truth? Why is it so important? Why can't I just go back? Lyra paused, but didn't look at him. She stood motionless, as though listening to something he couldn't hear. You can go back, Ethan, she said finally, her voice low. But it won't change anything. The truth is always there, whether you see it or not. But once you do, once you understand, there is no going back. That's the cost. The cost. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Was it really that simple? Could he just walk away? He had no idea what the truth was, but a part of him already felt like he was in too deep. There was no turning back now. He wasn't sure if it was fear or something else, but his legs moved forward on their own, following Lyra deeper into the fog. Suddenly, the landscape before them began to shift. The gray haze seemed to twist and change, as though the air itself was bending around them. Ethan blinked, his senses struggling to process what he was seeing. There were shapes emerging in the mist, figures that looked almost human, yet their forms shimmered, flickering in and out of existence. He stopped in his tracks, his breath caught in his throat. What are those? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She stood still, watching the shifting shapes with an expression that was hard to read. They are the forgotten, she said after a moment. Lost souls, or perhaps something else entirely. They were once part of the world you know, but now they exist between realms, trapped in the smoke fields. They are neither alive nor dead, but they remember. Ethan could barely wrap his mind around what she was saying. Lost souls? Trapped between realms? It sounded impossible, yet the figures moving before him felt real, tangible, as though they could step out of the mist at any moment. He watched as one of the figures turned its head, its eyes glowing faintly in the fog. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Do they see us? He asked, his voice shaking. Lyra nodded. They know you're here, Ethan. They know you're looking for answers. Ethan could feel his pulse quicken, the air growing heavier with each passing second. The smoke seemed to close in around him, and the strange figures began to move, slowly at first, then faster. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift as though the very earth was alive, as if it was reacting to their presence. The fog had become a living, breathing thing, and Ethan felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. We need to keep moving, Lyra said, her voice urgent now. The truth is just ahead, but we can't stay here for too long. Ethan nodded, his legs moving almost mechanically as he followed Lyra. His mind was spinning. Everything was happening so quickly, and he couldn't help but feel like they were moving towards something huge, something that would change everything he thought he knew about the world. The fog grew denser, the figures still lingering just beyond the edges of his vision. He could hear faint whispers now, voices drifting in the air, but they were too soft to understand. As they moved further, Ethan could feel the presence of the smoke growing stronger, as though it was reaching out to him, pulling him deeper into its embrace. He could sense something watching him, something ancient and powerful, waiting for him to take the final step into the unknown. And just as he thought he could no longer take the suspense, Lyra stopped once again. "We're here," she said, her voice quiet, but resolute. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Whatever was coming, he was ready, or at least, he thought he was. The air felt charged as Lyra led Ethan deeper into the fog. The dense mist had thickened to a point where it seemed to absorb all sound, leaving only the soft crunch of their footsteps beneath the shifting ground. The figures that had once appeared to be fleeting shadows were now all around them, their movements subtle, but unmistakably close. Ethan could feel their presence, could sense that they were watching him with eyes that were both knowing and ancient. A strange chill ran down his spine, but he didn't stop walking. He couldn't. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice barely rising above a whisper. Lyra, still a few steps ahead, did not turn to him. "Now," she said softly, "you will see." They walked for what felt like an eternity, though it was hard to say for sure in the shifting world of smoke. The ground beneath them seemed to ripple, the earth itself breathing as though it were alive. Ethan's senses were heightened, every sound and movement amplified in the silence. He could feel the weight of the fog pressing in around him, and the sense that something was drawing them closer to an inevitable moment. Finally, Lyra stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes glowing faintly in the mist. "This is it," she said, her voice carrying a strange finality. Ethan's heart raced. This was the moment. The truth. The answers he had been searching for. He took a step forward, but the fog seemed to shift again, opening up in front of them. What lay beyond was unlike anything he had imagined. The air felt thick with energy, an almost tangible force that radiated from the center of the space. In the center of the clearing, a structure stood, its form half visible in the fog, but unmistakably ancient. It was made of a material Ethan couldn't recognize, glowing faintly with a light that seemed to come from within. It pulsed with a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, as if it were alive. Ethan couldn't help but stare. "What is that?" he asked, awe creeping into his voice. "That," Lyra said, her voice distant, "is the key, the heart of it all." She paused for a moment, letting her words settle in the air before continuing. "It's where the truth lies, Ethan. The answers you've been searching for are locked inside." Ethan stepped forward, his mind racing. He felt as though he had been led here for a reason, as though this was the moment everything had been building toward. He reached out a hand, but Lyra's voice stopped him. "Be careful," she warned, her tone suddenly serious. "What lies within is not what you think. It can change you, reshape everything you know. Are you truly ready?" Ethan hesitated, his hand still hovering inches from the glowing structure. The fog around them seemed to draw in closer, the figures that surrounded them silent but watchful. He felt the weight of the moment, the enormity of the decision. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he knew one thing. There was no turning back. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped forward, his fingers brushing against the surface of the glowing structure. The moment he touched it, a wave of energy surged through him. It was like nothing he had ever experienced, warmth, power, and an overwhelming sense of knowledge flooding his mind all at once. The fog around him began to swirl, the figures shifting and whispering, but Ethan couldn't focus on them. He was too caught up in the flood of images and sensations racing through his mind. He saw flashes of things, strange landscapes, alien cities, and faces he didn't recognize. The truth was unfolding before him, but it was so vast, so complex, that he couldn't make sense of it all. He tried to pull away, but the energy seemed to grip him, pulling him deeper into the vision. The fog around him began to pulse in time with the rhythm of the energy, and he felt his body trembling. "Ethan," Lyra's voice called out to him, distant but urgent. Focus. You have to focus on the truth. He tried, but the flood of information was overwhelming. The images continued to flash, some familiar, others completely foreign. He saw moments from his own past, faces of people he had known, but they were distorted, warped, as though they were part of something bigger. A vision of the future appeared, a future that felt both distant and immediate. Ethan couldn't pull himself away. He was drowning in the truth, but the more he saw, the more questions formed in his mind. What did all of this mean? What was he supposed to do with this knowledge? And, most of all, what had he just uncovered? The moment Ethan touched the structure, everything seemed to explode inside his mind. The flood of images intensified, blurring together into a chaotic swirl of light, color, and sound. It felt as if his entire being was expanding, stretching far beyond the confines of his physical body, as though he was no longer bound by time or space. He tried to focus, to hold on to something solid, but the visions kept coming, faster and faster. He saw himself in places he had never been. Alien worlds, cities built on floating islands, strange landscapes bathed in impossible colors. He saw people he didn't recognize, faces that seemed both familiar and foreign. They were looking at him with expressions that were hard to decipher, as though they knew him but he didn't know them. Some of the faces were filled with fear, others with hope, but all of them seemed to be connected to him, tied to his destiny in ways he couldn't yet understand. Among the flashes, there were images of Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This was a version of the planet that was scarred, broken, on the brink of something terrible. Ethan saw a future where humanity was fighting against forces beyond their comprehension, struggling to survive against an unknown enemy. And then, amidst the chaos, a voice, soft, yet clear, echoed in his mind. This is what you were meant to see, Ethan. The truth. The beginning and the end. You are the key. The words struck him like a physical blow, and the images around him began to slow. He felt his feet on the ground again, solid, real. The energy that had been surging through him started to ebb, and the visions began to fade. Slowly, the fog around him returned to its usual, haunting stillness. Ethan blinked, trying to clear his mind, but the weight of the experience lingered, a heavy presence that filled him with both awe and dread. He looked around, and for the first time, he realized how much he had changed. The figures that had surrounded them were gone, and Lyra stood a few feet away, watching him silently. He felt an overwhelming sense of clarity, but also confusion. What was that? What had he just seen? Lyra, he said, his voice hoarse. What did I just experience? Lyra took a step closer, her gaze steady. You've seen it. The truth of what is to come. The future, the past, and everything in between. It's all connected to you now, Ethan. You've been shown the path that lies ahead. Ethan's mind raced. He could still see flashes of the future, the broken earth, the faces of people he didn't know. And yet, amidst all the confusion, one thought stood out. He was the key. What do you mean? I'm the key, he asked, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and fear. Lyra's eyes softened slightly, though her expression remained serious. You have a role to play, Ethan. A choice to make. You are the bridge between what is and what could be. But it's not an easy path, and it won't be without sacrifice. The truth you've seen isn't just a warning. It's a responsibility. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He felt overwhelmed, as though the weight of the world had just been placed squarely on his shoulders. The future of humanity, of the earth itself, seemed to rest in his hands. But how? He was just an ordinary person, wasn't he? He had no training, no special powers. He was just a man thrown into a world he didn't understand, surrounded by forces beyond his comprehension. I don't know if I can do this, Ethan said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. I'm not ready. I'm not. You don't have to be ready, Ethan, Lyra interrupted. None of us are truly ready for what lies ahead. But you have to make a choice. You can walk away and let the world follow the path it's on. Or you can step into your role and fight for a future that might still be saved. The weight of her words sank in. Ethan felt the enormity of the decision before him, the responsibility that came with it. He had seen what the future could hold, and though it was terrifying, he knew he couldn't ignore it. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, but one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. The truth had found him, and it was up to him to decide how to face it. He took a deep breath, the fog swirling around him as though it, too, was waiting for his next move. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice filled with resolve, though he still wasn't sure what he was asking. Lyra nodded, a hint of approval in her gaze. "Now, you make your choice." The weight of Lyra's words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Ethan stood there, his mind racing, the fog swirling around him as though it had a life of its own. He could feel the intensity of the moment pressing down on him, the decision before him feeling as monumental as the future itself. Lyra's eyes were steady, watching him closely, waiting for him to make the choice that would shape everything. He had seen the future. He had felt the burden of the truth. But the question remained, what was he supposed to do with it? "I don't know if I can," Ethan said, his voice strained. "I'm just a man. What can I do against all of that?" He gestured toward the shimmering structure in the distance, the faint light still pulsing as though it was calling to him. "You're not just a man, Ethan," Lyra replied, her voice calm but firm. "You are the one who has seen the truth, the one who can see what lies ahead and what can still be saved. Not everyone has that vision. Not everyone is given that choice." Ethan looked at her, still unsure. His heart pounded in his chest, and he felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had never wanted to be part of something bigger. He had never asked for this responsibility. And yet, here he was, standing on the precipice of a future he could hardly understand, with the power to change it or let it slip away. "I didn't ask for this," Ethan said quietly. "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to live my life. To be normal." Lyra stepped closer, her gaze softening, though the urgency remained. "None of us get to choose, Ethan. The world is full of people who are given roles they didn't ask for, and they still make a difference. You have the chance to shape what happens next. You can fight for a future where there is hope, or you can walk away and let everything fall apart. But whatever you choose, you will never be the same. The truth you've seen will change you." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. He thought about everything he had seen. The future, the broken earth, the faces of people he didn't know, and the overwhelming sense that he was meant to be a part of it all. It was too much, but somehow, deep down, he knew that turning away wasn't an option. He couldn't unsee what he had witnessed. He couldn't forget the faces, the fear, the hope. He opened his eyes and met Lyra's gaze, a quiet determination settling over him. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice steady now, though his heart still raced. Lyra gave him a small nod, her expression one of approval. "Follow me," she said simply, turning and heading toward the glowing structure. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but then he followed, his footsteps firm and resolute. The fog seemed to part as they walked, guiding them toward the heart of the smoke fields. The world around them felt charged with energy, and Ethan could sense that the moment they were heading toward was drawing near. The ground beneath them hummed with an unfamiliar rhythm, and the air crackled with electricity. As they drew closer to the structure, Ethan felt a sense of both dread and anticipation rising in him. This was the moment he had been brought here for. This was the point where everything would change. They reached the structure, and Lyra paused, turning to face him. "The choice you make here will define everything. The truth will guide you, but it is you who must decide how to use it." Ethan nodded, his mind clear for the first time since this all began. He was ready to step forward, to face whatever came next. The future had shown him its face, and now it was his turn to decide what role he would play in it. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to walk it. He stepped forward, placing his hand on the surface of the glowing structure. The energy surged through him once more, and this time, he didn't resist. He embraced it. The future, the truth, and the choice were all in his hands now. The moment Ethan's hand touched the surface of the glowing structure, a surge of energy coursed through his entire body. It was unlike anything he had ever felt. Warmth, power, and an undeniable sense of purpose flooded through him, leaving him breathless. His body tingled with the overwhelming force of it all, and his mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. The world around him seemed to blur, the fog spinning faster, the figures flickering in and out of existence. He felt a deep connection to the structure, as though it had always been a part of him, waiting for this moment. For a brief second, the noise and confusion of the world faded away. Ethan saw everything clearly, past, present, and future all mingling together in a vast, infinite web. The faces he had seen before flashed again, clearer now, and he understood. They were not just faces. They were people, threads in the great tapestry of fate, each one tied to him in some way. As the vision deepened, the future unfolded in a way that made his stomach twist with a mix of fear and awe. The earth was not as he had once known it. It was fractured, broken, with humanity hanging on by a thread. He saw cities in ruin, forests burned to the ground, and oceans rising as the planet struggled to survive. But even in the midst of the destruction, he saw sparks of hope. People were still fighting. There was still a chance. His place in all of this was clear now. He was a key player in the battle to save the world, a bridge between the past and the future, the link that could turn the tide. The knowledge surged within him, and Ethan could feel it settling deep in his chest, filling him with a sense of responsibility he had never known. He understood now. He wasn't just an observer. He wasn't just a man caught in the middle of something beyond his control. He was a part of it, and it was up to him to decide what to do with the power he had been given. The truth was clear, but the weight of it was almost unbearable. He could see the path ahead, but it wasn't a straight line. It was filled with obstacles, twists, and turns. Choices would need to be made, sacrifices would be required, and there would be no easy answers. But one thing was certain, Ethan couldn't walk away from this. The responsibility was his. Now, the future, the fate of humanity, rested in his hands. Slowly, the vision began to fade, the energy retreating as the fog around him settled once more. Ethan gasped for air, his chest heaving with the intensity of the experience. He pulled his hand back from the glowing structure, but the sense of purpose, the weight of the truth, remained with him. He turned to Lyra, who had been standing silently beside him throughout the vision. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, an understanding, perhaps, or an expectation. "You've seen it, Ethan," she said softly, her voice steady. "Now, you know what you must do." Ethan nodded, though his thoughts were still racing, trying to piece together everything he had just experienced. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, his voice low. "I don't know if I can do this." Lyra stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You don't have to be ready. No one ever is. But you have the choice. The power is within you, and the future is waiting for you to take that first step." Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He knew there was no turning back now. The truth had found him, and there was no escaping the responsibility that came with it. The future and the fate of the world depended on the choices he would make from here on out. He stepped back from the structure, his mind finally clearing. The fog no longer felt as oppressive, but the path ahead still seemed unclear. He didn't know what would happen next, or how he would find the answers, but he knew one thing. He was ready to take that first step. Whatever came next, he would face it. The journey was far from over, but it had just begun. The air was heavy with anticipation as Ethan stood there, the weight of the decision settling in his chest. The truth had revealed itself to him, a flood of knowledge that he could no longer ignore. He had seen the future, felt the responsibility that came with it, and understood the role he was meant to play. But now, standing before Lyra and the glowing structure, he was faced with the reality of what lay ahead. He wasn't sure what the next step was, but one thing was clear: he couldn't walk away. The world, the future, depended on the choices he made. Lyra's voice broke the silence, soft but firm. "Ethan, you've seen the truth. Now you must act. The world won't wait for you to be ready." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He wasn't sure what that meant yet, but he knew Lyra was right. There was no waiting. The time to make a choice was now. He turned to look at her, his eyes steady, despite the whirlwind of thoughts still swirling in his mind. "I'm ready," he said, his voice quieter than he expected. The words didn't feel as confident as he wanted them to, but they were the truth. He had to be. Lyra nodded, as if she had been expecting this. "Good," she said simply. "You are not alone in this, Ethan. There are others who are already preparing, others who will help guide you. You'll need them, and they will need you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Others? He had seen so much already, and yet the idea of allies, people who were already fighting for the same cause, was both reassuring and terrifying. He had never thought of himself as a leader, let alone a part of something much bigger. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Lyra gave him a long look, as if weighing how much to say. They are the ones who know what is coming, the ones who understand the true nature of the enemy. They are scattered, but they are already working to stop the coming destruction. You are a part of that now. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to piece everything together. There was so much he didn't understand, so many questions he needed answers to. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that there was no time for doubts. If he was going to play his part in all of this, he needed to act. The fog around them seemed to shift, growing denser, as if reacting to the thoughts in his mind. The ground beneath his feet hummed with energy, and he could feel the presence of something much greater than himself. What do I need to do first? He asked, his voice steady now, the uncertainty beginning to fade. Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment, Ethan saw a glimpse of something. Hope, perhaps. First, you need to trust yourself, Ethan. The path ahead will not be easy, but it is yours to walk. There will be choices, and some will be difficult. But remember, you are the key. The future depends on the choices you make now. Ethan nodded, understanding that the journey ahead wouldn't be simple. He had already seen enough to know that. But it was his journey now, and no matter how uncertain it seemed, he had to take that first step. He could feel the weight of the responsibility settling in, but there was something else too, a flicker of determination. It was time. The truth had found him, and now it was up to him to shape it. As he turned to look at the glowing structure one last time, he felt a deep sense of resolve. He wasn't sure what would happen next or where the path would lead, but he knew that he was no longer just an observer. He was a part of something much bigger, and for the first time in his life, he felt ready to embrace it. Lyra stepped back, giving him space. The first step is always the hardest, she said softly. But you are ready, Ethan. Take it. Ethan stood still for a moment, his heart steadying. Then, with one final breath, he stepped forward, knowing that the future and the world were in his hands now.